Well, the clock is ticking for the goods and services tax. The Congress party continues to be non-committal. If the government does decide to push ahead without the Congress support, then political parties in Tamil Nadu, especially the AIADMK, will hold the trump card. The Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, J. Jayalalitha, has openly written to the Prime Minister expressing reservations over the GST. Did yesterday's meeting of the empowered state finance ministers break the deadlock? Joining us now for the first reaction from the AIADMK is the party spokesperson, Mr. K. Pandya-Rajan. So appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. The empowered panel on the GST met in the capital yesterday. Has there been any change in the AIADMK's position when it comes to the GST? Do you support the GST bill in its current avatar?
No, not really. In the sense, we raised about 10 issues initially. Our opposition is primarily based on the fact that Tamil Nadu is a producing state, it's an exporting state. We produce more than 50% of what we consume. And we are also unique from that sense, while as a philosophy, having a unified tax administration system across the country for both goods and services is acceptable to us. Out of the 10 issues we raised, about 4 of them have been addressed to our satisfaction. But the key issue is the loss that we will suffer as an origin state. Over about 5 years, we've asked for compensation, at least 5 years, though it's a permanent loss of around 9,270 crores based on the current consumption and production patterns. So this is what we've asked. And the second key thing we asked is the constitution of the GST Council. We believe we don't need a council like this in the first place as a statutory body. But if we must have that, it can't have the structure where central government has a veto. We would like to see a council where states hold higher percentage of voting rights in proportion to their economic size. For instance, Tamil Nadu contributes 10% to the GDP of India, though we are only 4% of the population and 4% of the geography, 6% of the population, but we contribute 10% to the GDP of the country. So we would like to see what our CM has proposed is a voting percentage in line with the membership of Rajya Sabha. You know, in some sense, the weightage of states have been factored into the Rajya Sabha representation for each of the states. So we'd like it to be along those lines. And some of the aspects relating to petroleum being kept out of GST, it should be done permanently. That's what we are saying. And more importantly, this proposal relating to this additional levy of 1% tax on the supply of goods, we are suggesting that the origin states be allowed to retain 4% of the central GST part of the interstate GST, which would allow us a better cash flow. You know, that's really a method of allocation, method of charging, you know, which is what we've suggested. Right. And but you know, sum and substance of it is that the kind of loss of fiscal autonomy that each of the states will have to go through this whole process, the compensation cannot be in the hands of a parliament, which, you know, you need to pass through the parliament and things like that. We believe that that's not going to work. It should be a simple and straight process for compensation, where the central government has to agree with the states like us. And what we want is a constitutional, rather independent body.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt you, sir, because you've said that out of the 10 demands that the AIADMK has raised, 4 demands have been met. Even as far as compensation is concerned, the chief of the empowered panel, Dr. Amit Mitra, in his conversation with me yesterday said that the centre now has changed the wording or will change the wording to guarantee compensation for 5 years to state governments. Does that satisfy you? Because that is one of your key apprehensions. And even as far as the 1% manufacturing tax is concerned, there seems to be unanimity or consensus at the state level that the 1% manufacturing tax is distortionary and hence must be done away with. So if the 1% is done away with, will that be a deal breaker as far as the AIADMK is concerned?
No, that's some movement, but our key thing is the quantum of compensation, or the principle by which the compensation gets arrived at. In my view, we've given a picture as to how much is the loss to be suffered by Tamil Nadu in this case. So 9,270 rupees 70 crores per year. It's a permanent loss. I mean, to compensate it over at least 5 years is what we have sought. And in terms of the GST Council, we have some serious questions. We can't have a GST Council with centre having veto and all states being equal in terms of the voting rights, because that's what they've come up with, which is not acceptable to us. And CM has specifically spoken about this to the Prime Minister, and Prime Minister has led the empowered committee of state finance ministers to take a call on this issue. That's as critical an issue in the sense the compensation in terms of its quantum and the compensation in terms of the way it gets arrived at, and the continuing controlling body, GST Council, its constitution, its voting rights, all those are key issues for us. And of course, the other issue that we asked for is the need for to enable states to levy a higher tax on tobacco. Yeah.
Right. Mr. Pandya-Rajan, yesterday was that crucial empowered state finance ministers meeting in the capital. What is the feedback that you've got post that? And do some of your apprehensions at least get addressed post yesterday's meeting, or do the apprehensions that you've just talked to us about and articulated here on CNBC-TV18 remain?
I think they remain. In my view, the only movement which has happened yesterday was, as I understand, aspects relating to tobacco, aspects relating to permanency of letting petroleum and petroleum products out of it. I think some of that has been addressed. But the key crux of the issue for us, from Tamil Nadu's point of view, as you know, Tamil Nadu is a state which is investing hugely in the welfare measures, and for us, this blow of another 9,270 crores per year will really not be something we can absorb at all. So that's clearly the quantum of the principle of arriving at the compensation, where I don't see any great movements which have happened. And rest of the things, so if you were to say out of the rest of the 6 issues, 2 issues seem to be moving towards some kind of a resolution. But to us, the key crux of the issue is compensation and the method at which it gets arrived, and the institutional mechanism to have a control over GST administration, which is the GST Council for us. Yeah.
So let me ask you this simply, Mr. Pandya-Rajan. We don't know whether the government will table the GST bill in this session or not. The political climate seems to have changed in comparison to what we saw last week. But if it does, and while the government maintains it wants to evolve a sense of consensus within all political parties, but if it does decide to push the bill through the Rajya Sabha, you have 13 members of the AIADMK in the Rajya Sabha. Will you support the bill? Will you abstain? Will you vote against it?
That's beyond my mandate to discuss here. That would be a political decision. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Puratchi Amma will take a call on this at the right time. But all that I would say is that she did commit to the Prime Minister that the consensus need to get evolved on these 10 aspects, which she raised with the Prime Minister. And I think we are some distance from reaching a real consensus on this, especially relating to compensation. And if it does happen, then Tamil Nadu CM Amma will take a call on the political decision of voting for it or not voting for it. But to us, it's some distance. This question is some distance away because we are nowhere near the consensus on specific aspects of compensation. Yeah.
So would it then be fair for me to say, if I were to understand what you've said very clearly here, that of the 10 demands that you've raised, 4 have been addressed. There is forward movement in 2, so at least 6 there is forward movement. But till all of your demands are met, and especially as far as compensation concerns are addressed suitably and appropriately, the AIADMK is unlikely to support the GST bill.
Yeah, in the sense, it's not only the quantum of compensation, it's also the process and the mechanism by which compensation gets arrived, and the ongoing presence of the state's rights in administering the GST as we go along. We don't want it to become purely a central government stuff. It's as much an issue about states' autonomy in terms of these fiscal aspects. We do see an intrusion into the state's domain, and as GST, by its very philosophy and concept, does attempt to create a standardized regime, a tax regime across the country. We see the value of it, but these are 3 aspects on which I don't think Tamil Nadu can afford to compromise. So to my mind, those are the three stumbling blocks which remain. And if central government does move forward with authenticity, with open, genuine negotiation, I see over the next few weeks, if they do engage in that and meet our concerns, address our concerns, then I see a positive movement forward as far as the GST is concerned. Yeah.
Mr. Pandiyarajan, what is the feedback that you got from the meeting that was held in the capital yesterday on some of the crucial demands that you believe have still not been addressed? Do you find support? Do you find other state governments also willing participants in those negotiations, or does the AIADMK find itself isolated? Because the sense one gets is that most other state governments don't seem to have as many issues as you've raised.
I think there are very few states in this country, Shireen, which are both producing states, net producing states and net exporting states. Okay, Gujarat is probably the one which is closest to us in terms of the potential loss it would suffer. And I don't think Tamil Nadu is engaged in any political process to mobilize support for our position. Okay, so to give you a sense of specific yesterday's empowered ministers meeting, I don't have a feedback yet from the team which went there and which participated in that. I hope to get that today. But in my view, I think this whole political process of the origin states coming together has not been happening, frankly. And no one is as much of a net exporting state and a net production state as we are. And I don't think the alignment of forces in this decision has been along origin states and consumption states. I don't think it's so. It's been more along political lines as of now, as I can see. And as you know, Tamil Nadu is plowing a fairly independent path as till now in this particular issue. For us, we are very clear. It's we're not throwing the political line of any other grouping in the among the states. We are clearly asking for compensation, right time, at the right place, and in the right manner. Yeah.
Mr. Pandiyarajan, I understand that there has not been a discussion on a specific rate at the empowered panel of state finance ministers yesterday, but what would be an appropriate rate, both in terms of the revenue neutral rate? What is it that you would like to see? We've had the Arvind Subramaniam panel suggest a rate of about 15.5%, a standard rate of about 18%. But given your concerns as far as revenue loss is concerned, what would be the appropriate GST rate to your mind?
No, frankly, Tamil Nadu hasn't taken a position on this. We only said if it is 18 and if it's that 1% model that you have, given what we have proposed, where you allow us to retain 4% of the central GST part of the interstate GST, then our impact would be to the tune of 9270 crores. And we want central government to engage in a conversation with us on this. I don't think that's been happening as yet. The track till now has been more of broad aspects and principles by which compensation gets arrived and things like that. I think this issue will close only if central government, especially the finance minister, directly has to engage in a meaningful conversation on settling the quantum and process of arriving at the compensation. In my view, at least to my knowledge, it's not been happening as yet. But as far as we are concerned, we are only,
So would it be fair for me to then say that there has been no meaningful engagement between the central government, i.e. the finance minister, and the AIADMK? Because we were given to understand that meetings had taken place between the finance minister and your chief minister. Do you believe that there has not really been a meaningful engagement on addressing the issues that the AIADMK has raised?
Not really. I mean, as you rightly said, there has been a meeting with the finance minister at the apex level. There's also been a meeting between the prime minister and the chief minister where they've discussed this aspect also. It's one of the many things which CM has presented to the prime minister. And all that I'm saying is what we expect is really this. The issue is zeroing around to a specific compensation and the process of compensation. And in my view, and to my limited knowledge of what's happening there, as I told you, I don't have as yet a feedback from the team which went to the empowered committee of finance ministers. I do hope to get it by the end of the day. So I won't be competent to make a comment on the kind of discussions which took place and the nature of deliberations which took place there. But as of now, I'm only basing it in the yesterday's conference mode. And I'll come back to you with the specific feedback on how things went. And I think it's also not fair to keep giving out to the media as to the specific processes in a certain discussion and the negotiations. All that I would say is that at this point in time, this is the stumbling block. While a few of the stumbling blocks have been removed, the key crux to us is really this. It's not really even the percentage that that has been talked about, that 18% or the 1% and things like that. As Congress has been engaging in those kinds of conversations, we've not engaged in those kinds of conversations. We believe that as long as it's revenue neutral, which is the principle behind this 18% as they have proposed, and we've said as long as you have revenue neutral rates, the floor rates with bands, and there's an agreement on the commodities to be excluded from GST, the IGST model, the aspects relating to that. And key for us is clarity on the dual administrative control. These are the areas where we have genuine apprehensions, especially rooted on the loss of fiscal autonomy to us and the permanent revenue loss. And to me, these are things which are getting addressed, but I think it needs to come to a close and a consensus before it gets moved in the parliament, in the Rajya Sabha. Yeah.
So let me ask you then, Mr. Pandirajan, do you believe that given the fact that the Congress continues to be non-committal in its support of the GST bill, the AIADMK, as you've pointed out very clearly, believes you're a far distance away from any sort of consensus being built on this issue. Do you think that it is then a pipe dream to expect the GST bill to go through in the monsoon session of Parliament?
The ball is entirely in the central government's court, and if they really wish to pursue this path, they need to quickly engage in direct, meaningful conversation centered around compensation. And I don't know why they're not doing that, in my view. And I won't put I won't hazard a guess as to whether it will happen in this monsoon session or not. Clearly, the ball is in central government's court. We have been very transparent in this entire process of negotiation. We are probably the only state which has laid down these 10 aspects where we do have expectations to be addressed. And 4 are clear, 2 are getting addressed, 4 of them are not getting touched. And those parts need to be touched directly, and we won't evade a consensus because we have no philosophical opposition to this entire idea of GST. For us, it's Tamil Nadu and its well-being. We can't take a hit of 9,270 crores in a single budget when our state's own revenue is only around 1 lakh crores now. Yeah.
So, Mr. Pandirajan, let me end then by asking you, sir. We can't be penalized for
being a performing state as the last Finance Commission. Yes. Yeah.
Fair point. Let me end then by asking you, sir. You said 4 issues have been addressed, 2 are being addressed. Is it going to be 10 or nothing? Or if the government gives you an assurance that they will meaningfully address the pending concerns that the AIADMK has raised, then you will give support to the GST bill if it were to be taken up in this session of Parliament?
That's a big set of ifs, okay? So I wouldn't like to give a presumptive answer on this. We would like to see central government engage in a deep conversation on the 4 pending issues, especially the crux of the issue, which is compensation. We can't afford. I don't think we are a state which has that kind of a cushion to kind of live without 9,270 crores kind of a loss. And I mean, if you have to answer your question directly, I don't think things will move if these 4 pending issues remain unaddressed. Okay? Yeah.
Well, that's a big statement there. You're saying things will not move unless the 4 pending issues of the 10 that the AIADMK has raised are meaningfully addressed by the government. Well, that gives us a clear indication of where things stand. Of course, the AIADMK has 13 members in the Rajya Sabha, so very crucial for the government to be able to get those numbers on their side in order to ensure the passage of the bill if the Congress doesn't play ball. But Mr. Pandeyarajan, thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18 and explaining to us the position of the AIADMK on the crucial GST bill. Thanks very much for your time.